This is the Business Storytelling Show, a top global marketing podcast listened to in more than 100 countries, live streamed on social media, and Christoph Trapp chats with industry leaders to help your company tell better business stories. Here's today's episode.
Hey, business storytellers, how's everyone doing? Today we want to talk about how to earn an audience when you podcast. Now, here's the key word in that sentence. You have to earn the audience. You're not building the audience. You're not doing any other buzzwordy kind of thing, but you have to earn their attention and you keep it. And what's interesting to me, or what's exciting to me is the author of The Audience is Listening is joining me today. We are literally making our way through the Webster family. Tom Webster's on the show this week, and his wife with her new book, Tamsin Webster. She's on the show next week. She was on an episode hundreds and hundreds of episodes ago when one of her previous books came out. So super excited to hear from both of them. But let's find out, why is it so important to think of earning your audience and not just building your audience? Or maybe I'm making too big of a deal on that topic here. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's I'm a big fan of audio, right? And I know we're on video today, but I think, podcast has to work as audio first, right? It's an audio forward medium. And one thing that really prompted me to write this book is whenever people ask, how do I grow my podcast? How do I grow my podcast? They give you marketing tactics and things like that. And that's advertising and promotion maybe, but it's not marketing with a capital M. And when I would talk to people about this, I would listen to their podcasts and they weren't very good. And that's, and so I wanted to write a book that basically helped people make better art. Because ultimately to me, a podcast is it's not a white paper. It's not a blog post. It's a piece of entertainment, and it has to start from that. It has to be a show.
You know what's interesting about that comment too? When one of my pet peeves. So you came on the show right earlier before we came on here, and I hate when people bring up pre-talk, pre-live, whatever. But I said immediately, "Oh my God, you sound so great!" And you says, "Well, that's part of the job." And I'm like, "Yes, it is." But you would be shocked how many CEOs who I'm sure make way more money than I do, come on my show or come on anybody's show, and they don't even have a microphone. They don't have, and I'm not saying you got to have fancy sound panels and all this other crap, but you can't spend $100 on a microphone to sound good. Why? Why is that a thing?
I don't know why that's a thing. I wish it were not a thing, but ultimately, you're not, like I said, this is not an audio white paper. It's not a blog post. It's an entertainment. And the interesting thing, and I'm sure you've probably seen this as a creator yourself. People will forgive a lot of things. They'll forgive, video quality and things like that. But even for a video, what they won't forgive is bad audio. They will not forgive bad audio. It's grating, it's irritating, and you don't have to spend a lot of money on gear, as you said, but you got to get your audio right.
You do. And I don't know why people don't do it. But while we're talking about, how do we look and how do we sound? This shirt, by the way, we are live on Amazon, but this shirt I'm wearing, if you like it, you can get it on Amazon right there. And if you're watching on Amazon, the carousel is below. Everything you can see around me, Tom's book, everything is on there. So click away and check out those products that you can use for your podcast. Now, okay, when you start your podcast, though, I mean, there's like a mix between, I like to say you have to bring the sizzle and the steak, right? So when you say entertainment, okay, great, we need entertainment, but we also need the steak, right? I mean, it can't just be sizzling and then it tastes like crap because we don't know what we're talking about. How do you find the right mix? Or you're not a sizzle and steak kind of guy?
I'm absolutely a sizzle and steak kind of guy, Christoph. So I do a weekly podcast for our business, Sounds Profitable, and I write that. I write the whole thing, and I essentially read what I wrote. Right, so I spend very little time in the actual recording of it. Where I spend my time is in writing it, and if I can make it shorter, if I can make it punchier, I do that because I'm able to do that. Right, it's again, unless you are only doing live, there's no reason not to make it great. And one thing I always advise podcasters to do is take a show from, take an early show that you did, get it transcribed by a human with absolute painstaking detail, every every piece of filler, all of that, and read it back, and decide, is this as good as I could have made it? Right? Probably not. And I think this is a really good exercise for people to do, and just look at, could I have made this better? And I'm not saying that you never release anything, or that you don't make your art. But if you want to build an audience, we are at I think a phase and a stage in culture and history where there's a lot of really high quality content out there. So if you want to grow an audience, I think you have an obligation to do a good job, right? To make a quality show, to make a quality product. You can't expect an audience otherwise.
What's interesting to me too is I grew up in the media world, the newspaper world back in the day, when the newspaper's main value proposition was, we can afford a printing press, so we can get out the stuff, right? And then even when I think about what we're doing today, I mean, we're recording this, and I did the same thing for a TV station 14 years ago, and it was a production. And now you and I are sitting wherever we're sitting, and we have all this stuff in front of us, and the production effort is so much lower. So let me ask you this. So I don't script anything, obviously, on this show, but we're also live, right? So that's one reason. But then I had Mignon Fogarty on the show, and if you don't know who that is, that's the Grammar Girl. In fact, when she emails me, sometimes I don't remember who that is until I see Grammar Girl, because nobody calls her that. But she says she scripts out the entire show because, right, it's grammar, so you can't say anything wrong, and somebody will pick it apart. Plus, she's got who knows how many millions of people listening by now. But if you're going to script it out, why do we even need the person, Tom? Why couldn't we just go to Hey Jen, and you have our avatar read it, and what's the value of the person in that scenario? It's an honest question. I'm not challenging.
Well, you bring up a good point, and I do think that there's a perspective, there's a point of view that that a machine is not going to be able to duplicate. That said, I'm not afraid of AI. I'm not afraid of any of these things in audio. And I'll give you a couple of really good examples here. I think number one, it enables the production of audiobooks where it might not be economically feasible, right? Not every book gets an audiobook. It costs extra money. And, if you can have an AI do it, why not? I don't have any problem with that. It's getting frighteningly good. And then the other thing, obviously, I do in our business sounds profitable. We have over 180 partners in the industry. It's primarily advertising supported, right? And I cannot stand hearing a host read ad more than once. And there's lots of host read ads they're dynamically inserted, and it's the same ad over and over and over. And if AI lets us refresh that creative on the fly, I think that's good, right? But ultimately, I think you need a human perspective if you're going to attract an audience.
I mean, I don't disagree with that at all. The one thing that I was just thinking about, though, is, so we've been talking about the production value, right? So like, we can produce the greatest show, it can sound the greatest, it can be whatever. But if nobody can find it, right? Like, if it's like, you can write the best book in the world, or even I was thinking about that because you said audiobooks. So I recorded one of my books as an audiobook. And you know why? The only reason I did it is because I wanted to see how it works. And I was like, I had no expectation of anybody finding it. And guess what? Nobody is finding it. So Marisa Colado over on Amazon, I really appreciate you following. If you guys are on Amazon, follow along so you get all my updates on any shirt I wear or any hat I buy. I got plenty of those. But anyway, Amazon Live, my friends. I'm still a big fan. Christoph Trapp on Amazon. You can find me there. But you have a great show. It sounds good. You have to get people to get to it somehow. I mean, you can earn them when you get them there, but how do you even get them to knock on the door?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the real world, meet space. I don't think podcasters do enough in the real world. I don't think they do enough locally. I say start locally. one of the points I've made in the book is, if you have a sports podcast, you can put a bunch of posts on X or Blue Sky or whatever. I don't think that's particularly effective, but why not put up some flyers in the restroom of your local sports bar, right? That's a captive audience. They're interested in sports. Find fairs and outdoor things, and do things locally. And look, if you get 100 listeners, I don't care if they're all your neighbors, because that's where it starts. You got to start somewhere. So I don't think podcasters do enough in meat space where humans are, and I think you can start local. And I think if you do that, and you start to get a feel for it. First of all, you get to actually meet some listeners, which I think is something that we should all do. But I'm not a huge believer in social media I don't think it works particularly well. And there's such a sort of rise in popularity of video podcasts on YouTube, and a lot of that is just down to discovery. And YouTube is an excellent app for discovery. So I think whether your podcast is on YouTube or not, I think the podcaster needs to be there. But again, I'm a big believer in local, and I'm a big believer in offline.
It's super interesting you bring up YouTube. Let me get back to that in a second here. But before I do, I want to throw this up for a little while. We were talking about HeyGen up here. If you scan that, I've actually tried that before, and you can create your own avatar and give him or her a transcript, and then they'll read it. It's actually not horrible. I did not hate myself. Now, I couldn't do a show like this because you and I are not going to, we can't play off each other. But if one person is an avatar and the other isn't, and you know what they're going to say, it might actually work. But heygen.com, and please scan that. I always make a couple bucks when people use my affiliate links, so I always appreciate that. Now, on YouTube, so there was new research that came out a couple weeks ago. I don't remember who it was. It may have been, maybe it was you. I don't remember. But on YouTube now being the number one podcast app, and I was just like, that's crazy. And I've been on YouTube with my podcast since they rolled it out, like day one. But why? Is that because of it's so much better to find podcasts than any other network, or why is that? Any theories?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things going on. It is easier to find content, right? It is the greatest content search engine in the world. It's also a really good app, and it's actually something I wrote about on the Sounds Profitable for our newsletter this week. It's a very good app, right? There's a lot of engagement. You can talk to fellow listeners. You can talk to the creators. A whole bunch of things that you can't really do in a podcast client, right? So I think it's part of the experience. And the other thing that we've done quite a bit of research on is that people will often consume both the audio and video versions of a podcast that has a video version, and they will make that choice dependent on their environment, their circumstances, or whatever. So if they're commuting or in the car, they may choose to listen to a show. But if they're at home alone, they may choose to choose to watch it. And what people tell us is that it actually helps them. For some people, helps them pay attention, helps them track. Right, if it gives them something to focus on. But the real key, though, is that they have the choice, and they make a choice to watch it when they want to pay attention to it, and they make a choice to listen to it maybe when they're in a little bit more of a lean back setting. But they have the choice.
What's interesting to me is when people try to come up with these completely made up rules, like, oh, people only want to listen. I think I kind of heard your story, your opinion embedded there a little bit, but people have this whole debate about audio and video podcasts, and I'm just like, why is that even a debate? Like, what are we even talking about? Like, if I can do a video podcast and a video live stream, and I can also get a good audio podcast. So, for example, this show, and I don't do this, but maybe now I should, because you put this idea in my head. Maybe now I should run it through the script or something, and just cut out the ums and ahs for the podcast version. I mean, maybe I should. It's not that difficult anymore. But why wouldn't I do it, right, when it's already part of the process anyways? And I mean, there's been audio podcasters for years. who do a video recording and then they use the clips, right? But they don't publish the whole video podcast. Makes absolutely no sense to me. I mean, did I hear that opinion correctly, or am I projecting?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't really care where your audience comes from, and I think it's a false choice, right? You don't have to do video if you don't want to do video. Make your art. But if you want to do video, then fine. You're now a video creator. I don't really care where the audience comes from, and I think the the key though is that wherever you are shopping your wares, as it were, it's got to work in that setting, right? It's got to work natively in that setting. One of the things that's always sort of drives me crazy is it's such a small thing. Maybe I'm just really persnickety about this, but if someone is listening to a podcast on a podcast app, right? That's where they get their podcasts. If someone's watching a podcast on YouTube, that's where they get their podcasts. And it's such a small little tweak to ask people in whatever format the podcast is being distributed to ask for the behavior that is relevant to that app, right? Hit subscribe. That's what you do on YouTube. You hit subscribe, right? It's a very simple thing to tweak whatever feed you're sending to ask people to follow or hit subscribe or do the action that you want them to do, rather than always saying, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Well, if you've put your podcast on YouTube, you know where they got it. They're on YouTube. You just sort of tweak the version that you send. It's the work of 5 minutes. Having said that, I don't do that because I'm lazy.
No, but what's interesting to me is, I mean, I try to do more and more of that, like just make those little updates and make the updates that matter based on the channel, the network you're on. Now, I want to get back to the sizzle and the steak a little bit because I'm getting a little hungry, almost lunchtime here in a minute. But there's a lot of people that have some kind of, I don't know, hurdle or barrier to overcome to podcasts, right? They say, oh, I don't sound perfect. I'm like, I don't sound perfect. I've had shows, Tom, where I lost my connection and the guest like you was on the show by themselves and they talked and talked and talked. And then all of a sudden they said, Christoph, are you still there? No, I wasn't. You lost me. So crap happens, right? Like nothing is perfect. I mean, today, we're looking great. We're sounding great. Everything is good today, but stuff happens. But how do people overcome the barrier when, first of all, they have to know their stuff, right? The steak. And then they also have to make it fun. I mean, not everybody is fun or entertaining. So how can people reach those two things at the same time?
Yeah. Well, not everybody can. And I do think honesty is a big part of that. And I think having some friends that will give you honest feedback, I think really helps. But it's hard to earn an audience. You don't deserve one. You don't have a right to one. You don't automatically get one because you've decided to start a podcast. So, we have very high standards. If you look at even what passes for the broadest entertainment, right? TV shows like, America's Got Talent or, Survivor and things like that. They're extremely well produced, right? They may be sort of broad concept mass appeal, but there's an incredible amount of care that goes into the production and the quality of them. So, and that's kind of what you're competing with, right? You're competing with everything in the world that someone else could be doing. So, I always feel bad when I say things like this, but you don't have a right to an audience, and you don't have to produce something perfect. You can produce something that's flawed. You can produce something that has mistakes and omissions and things like that. That's, make your art, but don't expect a big audience. I think that's the key is, if you've got people on your side, then the mistakes they're kind of a gift in some ways. But I do think if you want to earn an audience, you have to take more agency, I think, with the creation of your content.
You have to make it fun. You have to make it interesting. What's interesting to me too is the amount of time, how things can actually be done today is so much quicker anyways. I mean, I was using Opus clips, and that's how we're going to hack up this show after the fact into little sound bites. And then I'm going to edit them and whatever. And they asked me, Tom, they said to me, how much money are you saving by using Opus clips? And I said, I don't know. But back in the day, I would have had to spend, I don't know, $2,000 to get 5 clips from a professional video editor. And today I wouldn't have done that. Like this week, I got 3 episodes. That would have been like $6,000 just for clips. I mean, like, I'm not complaining, but I mean, there's gotta be a line somewhere. So, things are getting easier and easier. So you just got to figure out what works and what doesn't work and whatnot. What can people expect though when they get started? I mean, I've seen plenty of people, and I thought they had a good audience relatively quickly, hundreds of people, for example, in a niche market. They all seem to be, or most of them seem to be pretty relevant. But then they see the huge numbers. They see the Casey Neistats of the world, or like millions of views skateboarding around New York City or something. How do we get people on the track to be realistic, and what is realistic when it comes to podcasting?
Well, comparison is the thief of joy. And look, if you've got 500 listeners, you are in the top single percentage of a podcast, right? I mean, the podcast, podcasting in general has a very, very long tail and a very small fat head at the beginning, with not a huge number of shows in there, right? So, I think if you go into it thinking about how you're going to monetize it from the beginning, you're making a mistake. It's the art has to come first. You have to make art. You have to make a great show, because you're not guaranteed an audience. Most people will never get a large audience. So, you have to find other reasons to keep going. You have to find, joy in it, I think, before you start to worry about things like that. But, the best advice I can ever give anyone who wants to attract a large audience is to make a show for one person. Make a show for one person. Get as detailed as you can about that one person. It's not you, it's somebody else. Put some, clothing on them, give them a job, describe them as much as you can, and do the show for that one person. And that's the key to attracting a large audience.
I was just thinking, what
my dogs have returned.
I was sitting here and I'm not super far from my kitchen. And I'm like, what just happened? Like, is the water running? No, it's your dog. Clickety, clickety, click, yep. Coming back in. That's funny. So now I forgot my question. However, comparison is the thief of joy.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
I will have to remember that. I think people have to be realistic of what's going on and what's actually doable and what makes sense. I mean, if you have a niche market, you're not going to have millions of people anyways. I mean, like, why are we being so unrealistic? Tom, it was great to have you on the show. Nice to see you, and always nice to hear your expertise, how to earn an audience. I think I'm going to start using that and quote you every time I say that, instead of saying we have to build an audience. We have to build an audience. What else? How do people connect with you? Where should they reach out? How do they stay connected?
Yeah, so you can subscribe to our newsletter at soundsprofitable.com. That's we put out a daily newsletter on the industry and business of podcasting, and I also write a weekly column. That's probably the best place. And also on LinkedIn. I'm one of the many Tom Websters on LinkedIn. But find the podcasting one, and that's me.
And that was not a joke. There is a lot of Tom Websters. I could not tell it. There's a lot of Tom Websters. But they, look at the picture, you know what he looks like. If you're watching on video, Spotify, for example, has video. Tom, nice to see you, and we're out.
Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review the Business Storytelling Show on your favorite podcast platform.